Can hear you.
Okay, welcome. Welcome, everybody. It's good to be learning together about Tanya in real life. And we're going to be recording this because many people who weren't able to make today's lesson in person want to be listening to this afterwards. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box and we'll be able to answer them that way. Okay, so we're going to be going through the Tanya. Tanya is a work that was written by the Alter Rebbe, who is the first Chabad Rebbe, who took very lofty concepts in Torah, who took the concepts of Kabbalah and similar things like that, and the works of the Zohar of Kabbalah, and he condensed them and he put them into quote unquote layman terms. But if you and I are the layman, it's not very easy for us to actually understand what that actually means. It's really hard concepts and difficult intrinsic concepts to understand. That being said, the works of the Tanya have been translated and explained, and many classes are taught on the Tanya, and there's a lot to learn online and in person about the Tanya. So if you're new to Tanya, this is a good introduction. It's good to give you an overview to help you understand what is Tanya, what's it all about, how does it relate to me. And if you have learned Tanya, this will give you more of like a summary and a way of like seeing things in a different, lens. And if you are interested in learning Tanya, after this first initial class, decide about going step by step. But for now, I will point out that on Chabad.org are many recorded classes on the works of Tanya. And there's also this incredible book. This book is called Lessons in Tanya. Lessons in Tanya is a translation of Tanya that has each of the lines of Tanya and it explains each one. So it's the wording and the lines, and it's very much easier to understand. There's also an incredible teacher, Rabbi Naftali Silverberg, and he does classes on both on TorahCafe.com and also on YouTube. He has a channel. So if you were interested in listening to someone's like very detailed classes, we're doing something else. We're going to explore the ideas of the Tanya and how they can be a guide for our emotional wellness. So it's a big buzzword, this emotional wellness, but how does that actually, what does it mean to us and how does it translate to us? So as an introduction, this book, this work, this life guide will teach us how do we align our behaviors and even more deeply our emotions with God's reality, with Hashem's reality. We are mundane, human, natural nature people, and God, Hashem, is like the supernal, spiritual, being. And how do we align our behaviors and emotions with that reality, with Hashem, with God's reality? At the end of the Tanya, when the Alter Rebbe, the Chabad, who wrote the Tanya, opens his opening beginning part of the Tanya as an introduction, there's a quote from the Torah. And the quote is, which means it is close to you, in kikar belecha, because it is close to you, beficha, in your mouth, and your heart, la sota. And now, what does this verse mean? This verse means it's not just that it's close. Karav ma'od, it is very close. That we're able to fulfill all the parts of Torah and all the mitzvot, not only in our behavior, but also in our emotions. That it's close to us and it's easy and that we should just be able to do it. So the Alter Rebbe, who writes the Tanya, says, what? It's so easy? Seriously? All the Torah and all the mitzvot are so easy all the time for us to do them? And this entire work of the Tanya is the answer to that question. What does this mean? It is so easy for us to fulfill Torah and mitzvot. So the Alter Rebbe answers this question in two ways. the long way and the short way. We know the story of the man in the Talmud who was coming to Jerusalem. He wants to know how he's coming to Israel. He wants to know as he comes into the gates, how do you get to Jerusalem? How do you get to Yerushalayim? And more important, like the old city, how do I get to where the Temple Mount is? And he comes to the city and he says, I'm looking for Jerusalem. And he meets a child. The boy says, well, there's the long way and there's the short way. The long way, you go all the way around, up the street, and this way. The short way, if you go here, you'll be able to get there. So who doesn't want to take the short way? Who doesn't want a shortcut? And so he does this then. And he goes the short way. And suddenly, as he comes to where he should be going up the mountain, there's a huge brick wall. Basically impossible to get over. I mean, you could try to scale the wall if you know how to climb, etc. and so on. So he comes back and he has to go all the way around the long way to get to where he needs to be. Very often in our lives, the only way we're willing to do the intense work, the long work, the hard work, the deep work to get to where we need to be is after we tried all the shortcuts and we experienced the misery of coming up against a brick wall. So we've tried the shortcut and we keep hitting a brick wall. In the long way of us aligning our reality with Hashem's, the long way is to learn how do we use our mind to generate emotions about Hashem in our heart. How do we use our thought process to direct our emotions in the way that we want it to go? The short way is to activate just a willingness and a courage. Sometimes we just need to find that courage to do it. Also, we have famous rabbis and lots of introductions to the Torah. But one of the main, a very famous rabbi was Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. He was actually known as the defender of the Jewish people. Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev always was a holy rabbi who lived in Berditchev, who always figured out ways to have a good word about the Jewish people, how to encourage people in the way of God and to invoke God's mercy for the Jewish people. And there's lots of praise. Shayna's giving me a little bit of a hard time, but hopefully someone will hear her. And there's lots of praise given for the Alter Rebbe's work by many great rabbis. But the way the Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev praises this work is a wonderful way. He says, what a great big God in such a small book. It has very high praise. Now, something important to know about Tanya, it's not Tylenol. It's not a quick fix. Oh, yeah, take this, swallow it, you're all good, your emotions are aligned, your feelings are aligned, your actions are aligned, we're all, exactly how we should be. It's not that, guys. But it does give us deeper healing and connection with our souls, with God, and with inner security. So we open up chapter 1. And chapter 1 says, who am I? And we get to meet our souls, our animal souls, our animal soul. But before our animal self, but before we get to that, the Tanya opens up with the word, Perek Aleph, Tanya Beso Perek Gimel Danida. Mashbiro so tehi tzadik va'al tehi rasha. It opens up with a phrase that it's quoted in the Talmud that before a soul comes down into this world, it's made to swear. Be a tzaddik, loosely translated as a righteous person, and don't be a rasha, loosely translated as a wicked person. And even if the whole world tells you you are a tzaddik, in your eyes, you should be as a wicked person. This is what the Alter Rebbe quotes when he brings in what it says in the opening in Talmud. So it says, be in your eyes, before a soul comes down, see yourself as a soul swears, be a righteous person, be a tzaddik. Don't be a rasha, don't be a wicked person, And even if the whole world tells you you're a righteous person, see yourself as a wicked person. This doesn't sound very good. The Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya says this can't make sense. What it's saying, what does this actually mean? How do we actually translate these words? And the Alter Rebbe also brings another quote, and this is from Ethics of Our Father. And in Ethics of Our Father, it says, "The Al Tehi Rosh B'fnei Atzmacha." There's a verse in the Ethics of Our Father that says, "Don't see yourself as a wicked person." So now we have two different quotes from Talmud, from the Ethics of Our Father. One is explaining the promise that a soul makes when it comes down into this world, to be a righteous person, not to be a wicked person. And the other one is saying, don't consider yourself wicked, even if okay. So how are we meant to view ourselves? Good, tzaddik, or bad, Russia? What does God want us to see ourselves? How does God want us to view ourselves in this life and in this world? And the Alter Rebbe says he is going to answer all these questions. Interestingly, why does the Alter Rebbe, why is the author of the Tanya open with this very question? Okay, so here's what as I see it. I'll try and separate the wording of the Tanya and the wording of how it's the reflection is how I see it. You see, naturally, this is the opening question, because we each and every single one of us sees ourselves as the center of our universe, and we engage our lives and in everything about us from that perspective. We see ourselves as the center, and from there out, we are able to, engage in everything else. When we change the way we see ourselves, we change the way we see everything in our entire life and the reality of everything in our entire life. Okay, so here's another question. Thinking of yourself as a bad person. If I think of myself as a bad person, that makes me sad. And it's not ideal, since the sadness makes it impossible to serve Hashem with joy. And we know it's such a fundamental thing. If du et Hashem b'simcha, we have to serve God with joy. So it's not ideal to see myself as a bad person. It's not a path to wholesome, energized, good living. Bad makes me sad. That doesn't connect me to Hashem. Sadness makes it impossible to serve Hashem with joy. Okay, so what if I'm very strong, I'm very big, and I say, I'm not a bad person? What do I say? I'm a bad person, but that won't make me sad. I'm going to put on a raincoat, and just like the water, it's just going to slick right off of me. What kind of attitude is, so my attitude is, it's bad, but it doesn't bother me. Well, that is even worse than saying I'm bad and then it causes me to feel sad and all the other repercussions that might have. It is spiritually dangerous. So this is what Alter Rebbe, when he writes this in the Tanya, he says, if you say I'm a bad person, but I'm not letting it affect me, that is much worse. You can become apathetic. You come to a place of irreverence, a place of not caring at all. And we hear the Alter Rebbe uses the word chas v'shalom. God forbid we should become that kind of person. Look, we know it's ideal to live with joy. And we know that feeling sad might be a contradiction to that joy. But there's something worse than feeling sad. It's feeling nothing at all. The Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, he clearly tells us feeling sad is a contradiction to our mandate to be joyous. But there's something worse than feeling sad, when we don't feel anything at all. And in describing this possibility, this is where the Alter Rebbe writes in his book in the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says, chas v'shalom, God forbid. That is a much, much worse place to be. You see, we're spiritually sensitive people. We appreciate the value of being joyous. We're determined to be joyous. And sometimes subconsciously, we avoid opening our hearts to any pain or frustration or sadness. You see, pain, frustration, sadness, difficulties, those are real and natural parts of our real life and our real realities. So we think it's unholy to be affected by unpleasant realities. It's unholy. I'm not opening my heart to that because I don't want to be affected by that. I'm going to be a person completely unaffected by pain. I'm going to be unaffected by sadness. I'm going to be unaffected by suffering because I want to be joyous. And in the first few lines of Tanya, especially as we talk to emotional wellness, we are told by the Alter Rebbe, we're advised there's nothing holy about avoiding our messy emotions. The Baal Tanya teaches us a healthy person is supposed to feel sad when faced with a sad reality. It says in the Tanya, if your heart doesn't feel bothered by something that's objectively bothersome, you could come to stop caring altogether, God forbid. Rejecting or avoiding our unpleasant emotions is not a holy way of acting. It's spiritually dangerous. Disrupting the natural connections between our mind and our heart can lead us to emotional dysfunction, lead us to not caring. Switching off emotions is very, very far from where we want and where we need to go, God forbid. Throughout the Tanya, we learn, we experience our full range of emotions. We're going to learn how to experience them, even the unpleasant ones, the painful ones, the sad ones, the ones that give us self-hate, the emotions that make us feel uncomfortable. And how Tanya teaches us how to process them and to approach them and hopefully deal with them from a place of strength and clarity. Definitely, we do want to live our lives from a place of joy. We don't want to park ourselves in a place of pain and suffering and difficulty and sadness. That's not what the Alter Rebbe is advising us to do. But to be people who aren't bothered by objectively by bothersome realities, this can lead to emotional dysfunction. And there's nothing holy about that. So after this first question, which we're not going to answer until much later, the question remains, based on the beginning opening line, is how should we see ourselves? Remember we said, you know, be a tzaddik, be a righteous person, be good, don't be a rasha, don't be a wicked person, don't be bad. So am I good or bad? So the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, now goes on to explain that we can find 5 different ways, 5 different labels that we can see ourselves. And he lists the primary labels or the self-definitions of what we call ourselves, and they're commonly understood definitions, and then we will redefine them. So the 3 main categories that people can put themselves into is tzaddik, a righteous person, a good person, rasha, a wicked person, a bad person, or beinoni, somewhere in the middle, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So tzaddik is commonly understood as being a perfect righteous person, a person who can do nothing wrong. A rasha typically means a terrible, evil person, a person who does nothing right. Beinoni commonly translates as a mix of perfect, a mixed person, partly perfect, sometimes terrible, some and some. Okay. Now, before Tanya existed, before this work became available to people, most people saw themselves as either I'm perfect or I'm terrible, or I'm average. Either sometimes I'm perfect and sometimes I'm terrible. But there's never the twain shall meet. It's like very black and white. Sometimes I do one or the other, but they're very separate from each other. Our failures were shameful. Our mistakes are permanent scars. But this isn't a recipe for energized, joyous living that we all need to live on a full, deep level. The Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, teaches that these labels are just technical terms. And there have these terms of Russia, wicked, tzaddik, righteous, Beinoni, in between. They can be used in the context of only assessing our behavior. Alter Rebbe, after he goes through discussing words at length, he explains that this is just a description of how I behave, and not the truth of who I am. We are much, much more than just our behavior. We are much, much more than anything that we can see on our external selves. Okay, we need to throw out these commonly used definitions, and we should no longer see ourselves as one of these things. I'm a tzaddik, a fabulous, wonderful, awesome, amazing, great person, or a Russia, terrible, no good, horrible, awful, bad person. Sometimes, if we listen to ourselves talking, we can find ourselves doing that to the people who we talk to our spouse, to our children, to our friends. When they listen to us, we say, oh, thank you, you're so amazing. Tzaddik. When they don't listen, we say, seriously? Such an idiot. Russia. We're not just being regular. We're not just being in between. So they take out the garbage. What a tzaddik. What a great, awesome, righteous person. Don't take it out. What a Russia. Whoa. So either you're terrible or you're wonderful. That's not okay. And we definitely don't want to be Beinoni, because in our definition of sometimes this, sometimes that, who wants to be wishy-washy? Who wants to be like, can't make up their mind what I am, this, that, the other? Pre-Tanya, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of angst, a lot of self-hate, a lot of beating ourselves up. Because if I'm not perfect, then I must be awful. And I don't want to be awful. So I'm going to determine myself and say that I am perfect. And I'm perfect, then I can't make mistakes. So don't you dare criticize me. Because if you do, I'll be awful. So this extreme labeling of ourselves and of behaviors, ourselves and others, is very dangerous and very toxic to ourselves. So we're going to learn new definitions of what it's saying when the soul promises to be a tzaddik and a Russia or a Beinoni. We're going to learn new definitions of how we can actually define our behaviors, not ourselves. Before we go to the correct definitions, we need to go a little bit deeper into ourselves and find out what's going on inside of me. You gotta understand, you see, we have our physical body, we have the parts that we see, we have the subconscious, we have the soul, we have so many different layers to ourselves. And in order to properly understand ourselves, understand why we behave the way we behave, or how we can change the way we behave, or how we, feel different things, we have to understand ourselves deeper. And the Alter Rebbe comes and he teaches us that inside of us, we have two completely and opposite souls in our bodies, in ourselves. Every person has two souls, two life forces. So in searching for an answer to how we define our behaviors and how we see ourselves, we look at our spiritual anatomy. We have our physical makeup and our spiritual makeup and our emotional makeup. We're driven by two completely different forces. Our two completely different forces are not just parts of ourselves. We are like one car with two separate engines. And it's not just two separate engines. We have two drivers who are fighting over the driver's seat at all times. They both want the driver's seat. They both want the steering wheel. They both want the brakes. There's two separate engines. Which engine is going to drive this? Which driver is going to drive this? Okay, a little reflection on what we just said. In this chapter, after the Alter Rebbe tells us how we're going to define ourselves and see ourselves, he's going to tell us. But before he does that, he says we have to gain a deeper understanding and explore our spiritual anatomy. Before we go into the detailed description, let's reflect on its value. Is it good? So the Alter Rebbe says, 1 second, before we figure out who we are, we have to figure out, is it good or is it bad? Now, we just spoke that we use the words good and bad very easily. And because we're measuring value, measuring value, we say, is something good or is something bad? we throw these words around almost way too easily, as if their meaning is absolute. So I say, is this good? Is this a good value? Is this a bad value? The truth is that the word good or bad, the values are not absolutes. You see, for each person, or each circumstance, or each community, or each country, we all attach different meanings and different values to the word good and bad. There really is no universal understanding of the words good and bad. Obviously, there's a moral compass that most people agree to, that, the moral compass that life is good. Unfortunately, or in reality, even those definitions are eroding. There's no absolute, this is good, this is bad. What one person feels is good, the next person can debunk and say that's terrible. But look at us, we still use the word this is good, this is bad, as if we all agree on what's good and bad. The Bala Tanya introduces us to a completely new paradigm, a completely new way of measuring value. It almost seems simplistic the way the Alter Rebbe explains it, but it gives us an immense amount of clarity. It liberates us from confusion, from self-doubt, from self-hate. It liberates us because it becomes our personal measuring system. We are all already well on the way to the goodness we want in our life. But we all have to kind of shift something. I'm going to give you kind of an extreme example. I was talking to someone and her family is, dresses a certain way. And she's chosen to dress somewhat differently. And in her education and in her reality, the way they dress is good. The way she dresses is bad. If I wear these clothes, either I am in the box is good, or I am out of the box. Out of the box is bad. These clothes, I am good, I am in the box. If I wear these clothes, I am bad, I am out of the box. If I am already out of the box, and so if I am already not good, means I'm bad, then I'm a bad person, I'm no good, I'm horrible. In that case, if I've lost all value, I might as well do all these other things that are out of the box. Either I'm in the box or I'm out of the box. So that's very extreme. But we all do it to ourselves. That's an extreme example of saying, okay, if I'm not being good and I'm already being bad, I might as well just be bad. And then it's a slippery slope. But here's another thing. What if we say to ourselves, we all do, if that person says, I'm a messy person. As I say I'm a messy person, I casually drop my shirt on the floor instead of hanging up because I'm a messy person. So it gives me permission to do messy things and engage in messy and indulge in messy behaviors. So we want to be careful how we use the words good and bad. And in general, how we use negative, unproductive, blameful, shameful, toxic labels, because they can really be disempowering to ourselves, to our children, to our spouse, to anyone in our life. Anytime we throw out a label, we kind of are like putting it in the bad category. Negative labels are very toxic. And the bottom line that Tanya is teaching us will give us a new perspective on how do you measure value and how do you measure behaviors. Here is the Baal Shem. Here is what I'm going to tell you what the Alter Rebbe teaches us is the paradigm, the shift, the way we need to see and measure value. This is what the Alter Rebbe says. God, Hashem, is the one and only true value. There's only one value. There's only one goodness. There's only one truth, and that is Hashem. That is God, that is godliness. From that perspective, anything that is connected to Him is within Hashem's truth is valuable and therefore desirable. Anything that is disconnected from Hashem, disconnected from God's truth, is other to valuable and is therefore undesirable. We're going to explain this plenty at length. So in making a decision, instead of thinking of ourselves as good or bad, we only want to be good and we never want to be bad, But like we spoke, that leads to so much confusion, cloudiness, people pleasing, and a lot of stuff that really can get in the way of wholesome, energized living if we're busy the whole time trying to be good and people please, and and things get very muddled in our reality. So that's not going to help us get to where we want to be in living a wholesome, truthful life for ourselves. So we can take on this view, this paradigm. Connection is what I'm doing, connection to Hashem, connected to goodness. Great. Is it making me live with more awareness of godliness, of my soul powers, of what my potential is? If yes, I'm in. Okay, this behavior this is behavior I want to engage in. If it doesn't coincide, or if it contradicts Hashem's truth, God's truth, godliness, goodness, my truth, my soul's dignity, my empowerment, if what this does contradicts my beautiful light, it doesn't belong to me. And so this is the introduction to the two souls inside of me and the two drivers that drive that one car, obviously. And here's something important to remember. So we say, is this behavior connection to God, connection to goodness to God, or is it disconnection? Now let's just clarify something. A Jew can obviously never be disconnected from Hashem. We are made, we are made in the image of God. We have part of God within us. So we can never be disconnected from Hashem. So then how does this paradigm, or how does this way, how does it actually serve us? Especially if I consider myself disconnected, then this just makes me further disconnected. About Alter Rebbe Tanya is telling us there's two things. There is the truth, and there's our experience of the truth. The truth is that a Jew can never be disconnected from God. As our soul is part of God, we are one and the same, but we can alter the way we experience that connection. For example, the sun is shining. Now the sun, every day the sun will rise and it will shine, and some days brighter and sometimes it will always be shining. No matter what people do, no matter what scientists try, no matter what, everything happens, sun will shine. That is the truth. But I can go inside a dark room, I can pull down the shades, and I can choose not to have any effect from the sun, not to see it at all. Nothing we do can really disconnect us from God, but we can engage in behaviors that either turn up the dial, amplify that connection, or we can engage in behaviors that quieten that connection, even though it can never go away. The radio waves are always running through the rooms where we are always moving, always going. We can choose to tune into them or not, but they are always there, the radio waves. So throwing out this old definition of tov v'ra, good and bad, and that it's just an objective, and we're taking on the Alter Rebbe's perspective that good and bad of being connected. Okay, 1 second. So we throw out the old definition of good and bad, that it's just objective, and we're taking on what the Alter Rebbe teaches us, the shift. That good and bad are really translated as tzaddik is connected, Rasha is disconnected. And so now we're going to go into our inner self. Okay, we're going to give this a few more minutes, and then we're going to sign off. Let's see how much more time we can give this for today. So let's meet driver number one. Driver number one is our nefesh habahamis, our animal self. Animal self, okay. It's our first life force. So we learn that our animal from nefesh achas mitzad haklipa b'sitra achra. Our animal self, our first life force and driver, comes from a place of, the word is klipa. Klipa, if you in Hebrew, actually translates as a peel or a shell. And this animal self that drives us, this higher level of consciousness that we all experience every single day, I'm going to call it the higher level of consciousness, is it serves a double protection. It comes from klipa. What is the double protection? It both hides what's inside of us, but also protects what's inside of us. So the Alter Rebbe uses the term klipa to talk about the energy that we have that hides Hashem that's inside of us, but also protects what's inside of us. This whole world that we live in is called a klipa. It's an energy that hides godliness. Nature kind of covers up that godliness is what runs this whole world. It's a layer of concealment that covers God's truth. But this layer of concealment that covers God's truth serves two functions that Alter Rebbe, based on the Zohar, teaches us. This world uses this word specifically because it conceals. And from conceal, when something covers up, if it's hiding godliness, then it says, oh, it's negative and it's unpleasant. But at the same time, it also protects. Because the reason Hashem hides himself in this world is so that we can choose Hashem. It's not that he's forcing himself onto us. We can choose goodness. We can choose connection. We can choose positivity. We can choose godliness despite Hashem's hiddenness. When we make that choice, when we make the choice to uncover what's hidden, to remove that klipa, we allow God's truth to shine forth with much greater intensity. The intensity of light that shines after darkness. If it's just dark, if there was always light in the room, it's one thing. But if you're in a dark space and you light a candle, that new light shines with even greater intensity. When you take off the peel of something, you can now enjoy, let's say you have a fruit. When you take off the peel, you can now enjoy the fruit so much more. You take an orange, you take off the peel. But also, you can enjoy the fruit in a way that you would never have been able to enjoy the fruit if the peel was never there. If the fruit grew without a peel, it would have nothing that protects its juiciness, its flavor, its nutrients. Everything would have been lost without the peel covering it and protecting it. And so in that sense, the klipa it protects, but it also hides. And this klipa is not necessarily a bad thing. Later on, we'll discuss that there's two kinds of klipas, there's two kinds of coverings. One that is a removable peel, and that's the one that we should engage in. And there's one that's not for us to engage in, but that we'll get to in a much later stage. For now, we're going to learn that our animal self, our higher level of consciousness, this is the first driver in our car. This one comes from the other side, from the side of klipa. The word sitra achra, the other side, is a term that the Alter Rebbe and Hasidism and mystical philosophy uses often. So we're going to be referring to it a lot. Okay, so a little reflection. Good and bad might be subjective. The Baal HaTanya does not use those words. The Baal HaTanya used the unique paradigm that is the one and only good is God, is Hashem, and everything else is other to Hashem. Anything that is not proclaiming Hashem's truth is on the other side of value and desirability. Our animal self is on the other side. It comes from other than Hashem. From here out on the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe actually continues to use a word that's very commonly used, and the word is ra, which is loosely translated as evil. Now, emotionally sensitive people, which most of us are, can be very triggered by the word evil. The word evil triggers shame and unpleasant emotions. When we hear the word evil, our mind paints a picture of monsters and sinister, creepy ugliness. In the Tanya, the word ra has a completely different meaning. It doesn't mean evil, monsters, bad, thieves, evil people. The Baal HaTanya shift, the Baal HaTanya used the shift to say the only good is Hashem's reality and connection to Hashem. From this perspective, evil just means connection from godliness, disconnect from Hashem. and even the possibility of disconnection from Hashem. And certain behaviors are the possibility that this can bring us to disconnection. So where is our nefesh habahamis, our animal self, our higher level of consciousness from? From Sitra Achra, from the other side of Hashem's exposed presence, from the other side of Hashem's apparent truth. Now, this life force is enclosed in our blood. It is our literal, this animal self is our life force. And it gives us life. It gives us physical life. And it's the drive to perpetuate physical life through everything in this world. Our animal self is the drive to preserve ourself and to perpetuate ourself and to pursue all comforts and pleasures. Our animal self is actually made up, the Alter Rebbe continues to write in this first chapter of Tanya, is made of 4 elements. And from these 4 elements, we get a lot of our disconnecting impulses. Now, you see, the animal self is often misunderstood. It's essentially not bad, our animal self or our natural self or our physical drive. It's a force, it's an energy, but it can be transformed. Yes, it has the possibility for disconnection, but it also has the possibility for profound connection with Hashem. The animal energy gives us our basic impulses and tendencies. It's divided into 4 elements, the 4 elements of the world: fire, water, wind, and earth. The first element, the first place that our energy comes from is fire. That's the drive to rise and burn passionately. From the element of fire, we have the drive to inflate our ego and see ourselves as better than others. This is the energy, this is the drive that gives us the drive to be angry. From pride, because it inflates my ego. If someone hurts my ego, then I get angry. So from pride comes anger. If I feel disrespected, angry. We're not elevated and respected. This is what brings out the anger in us, and this is the energy of fire within us. But this is also the drive to invest ourselves with burning passion into a lot of things. Then comes water. Water is the drive in us to indulge in pleasure. Water makes everything grow. This is our drive to pursue comfort and avoid discomfort. No one wants to be uncomfortable. This is our drive to keep our habits flowing. Whatever our habits are, keep flowing in an established pattern, even when we don't like our habits. And a lot of us don't like a lot of our habits. But we want to avoid the uncomfortable work of changing our habits. This is the water, the flow in our life. Then comes the wind. The wind is the drive to blow nothingness. You see, from the element of wind, we have our drive to waste time and drift into meaningless pursuits, to spend time. Unfortunately, the saying of killing time is suicide on an installment plan. Basically, it's just a slow way of doing nothing. We want to disengage from anything meaningful. We just want to fly into nothingness, sometimes into being wild, into wasting our time and filling our time with nonsense, into meaningless things. I want to have fun, just indulge in things that, fun and laughter and waste of time in ways that are really disconnected from Hashem. Like, I'm out of here. When we think about wind, it's, what's the difference between a Jewish holiday, a Yom Tov, a Chag, and a holiday? A holiday is an escape from reality. Now, sometimes we need that. Let's not disconnect that. I'm having a holiday, which means I am not doing anything. I'm escaping from reality. A Jewish Yom Tov or a Chag or a Jewish holiday is not that I'm escaping from reality, but rather I'm getting much deeper into reality. I'm getting the strength to deal with life on a much deeper level. And the fourth thing, so that's what the wind is. The wind is all this nothingness. And the fourth is earth. The earth is just the drive to sink into laziness, to be sluggish, sadness. Earth is heavy. This is the drive to procrastinate, to feel disempowered, stuck, depressed. Now, not clinical depression, that's a separate thing. Just lethargic. Oh, depressing self-attitude. I'm miserable. I was miserable yesterday. It can get worse, but I'll be optimistic and say it can get worse. It's the slow suck. It's the earth within us. It pulls us down into a depressing attitude. Okay, so a little reflection. All of these qualities sound so ugly. I don't want to be lazy or waste time in meaningless stuff. I don't want to be escaping reality into meaningless pursuits. I don't want to be a person who's constantly pursuing pleasure, or I'm allergic to discomfort. I'm only looking at ways to make myself feel good. I don't want to just get angry because someone was mean to me. I'm not going to let that happen. I don't want to be that kind of person. I'm not going to let all those things happen to me. Those are not but me. But guess what? Hashem made all of us. Hashem means for it to be this way. It's a natural, inherent part of who we are. We are wired for so much potential for disconnection. That's how God made us. We are made wired for disconnection. There's no shame in having these impulses and tendencies. There's no shame in the anger, the laziness, the earth, in all these tendencies, all these wants. Just like there's no shame in having fingernails. Because we're all designed by God himself. While we don't want to resign to our weaknesses, we might not like our tendency to be lazy, messy, unkind, get into a bad mood. We want to embrace them, because commitment to connect to Hashem, to connect to God, is to get goodness, to connect to our soul and to our deep, true self. These weaknesses, these exact animal self realities and expressions give us a lot of opportunity for deeper connection. It's like that peel of the fruit. It might hide what's underneath, but it also protects the fruit. Our weaknesses might hide our inner light, our neshama, our soul, but from those places, those are the springboards from which our light, our neshama, our goodness can and will shine forth with greater intensity. You know, think about it this way. If you're feeling lazy and you push your, and you know, if we're feeling lazy, and the only way to push ourselves is to, you know, push yourself to do worse. And you could, you know, if you never felt lazy, you would never push yourself to do more. So it's in feeling like, okay, I need to make a bigger effort, that we actually get to give ourselves a bigger push. If you feel down, if you feel like a piece of dust, despondent from life's circumstances, like the earth within us, just like feeling like, oh, this is really, really, really hard. The only way to move past that is actually to dig deeper, to find my dignity, to find my compassion, to find my empowerment, to find my self-worth. Because only if I find those things, that is finding that is pulling off the peel and taking off the shell. Deeper, that to be able to experience our consciousness. We have to experience our consciousness, our conscious, in order to dig into our subconscious, our deeper light. So yes, this clip is like a peel of a fruit that both hides and protects us. Our weaknesses hide our inner light, our neshama, but they're also the springboards that we can shine forth. Even when we decide that we need to quiet some of these tendencies with medication for clinical depression or other mental concerns, the fact that these tendencies are part of our spiritual self means that we need these tools to reach our great potential. You know, if someone has a stronger drive for one of these things, it's exactly in that place that he's able to dig deeper within that exact hardship to be able to go bigger, to go further. And that's what we're going to be learning about during this book of the Tanya. Just going to take another 5 minutes and finish up. It's also interesting that on this journey towards authentic connection with God, with Hashem, the very first piece of information we are learning is the first thing, as we're going to learn how to connect with Hashem, an authentic connection, and that's what we want to choose, is connection. The first thing we learn is we are wired with a very strong possibility for disempowerment or disconnection. So you got to know that. You see, it's like when a wise friend is giving you directions and telling you about going somewhere. They tell you about the dangers along the way. You know, if you don't have any awareness, when you meet up with those dangers, you're going to be very frightened or even hurt by them. If I tell you that you have to come to my house and I don't tell you there's a big pothole in the road, there's a dangerous place over here, then when you encounter them, either you'll fall into the pothole or you'll get so nervous. This must be the wrong way. I'm going the wrong direction. Why is this in the way? Why is there a roadblock? Something's wrong over here. But if I give you the information, then you have empowerment. You know what to expect. It's like walking in the darkness. And when you bump into a pitfall, it's either you become, if you get the blockade and you weren't expecting, you're very scared. It's not meant to be here. I'm in the wrong place. Something's wrong. You don't know about the pothole. You actually fall into it. You get hurt by it. But if we know about it, then I know I can walk around it. I know I can climb over the blockade. I know that even though it's a weird looking windy road, there is an end to it. We can go with confidence. We can see where we are. You see, this is the difference of having directions in the dark and in the light. All those obstacles are there. But if the light is shining, I know how to navigate around the obstacles to get to where I want to go. If we don't know about these obstacles of our nefesh habahamis, if we do not know about these obstacles of our tendencies and our self and our animal expression and our higher consciousness, if we don't know that these things are in the way of where we're trying to get, then when we encounter these tendencies, oh my goodness, either they're going to run our reality because we're so nervous of them, or we're going to suppress them completely, but we're just not going to be able to reach our goal. If you encounter them unaware, you fall into the pit. That's what creates confusion and uncertainty and scared. But if we know they're there, then we can harness them for growth. If I know I'm going to encounter these things, the way I want connection to Hashem, I want to choose that. But on my way to get to my goal, I'm going to have all these things along the way, and they're going to be there. These are the very places that I need to get around and over and figure out how to navigate to get to my goal. And when I navigate each of these, then from there, I'm going to shine. That's the shell, the cover of the fruit. These are our greatest places for potential. And the Baal Tanya, the Alter Rebbe tells us, it's like turning on the light. Everything's already there, but this is the aha moment. Telling you what's going on, telling you what you're going to encounter and what your true self is, that's turning on the light. Now we can see the obstacles. Now we know what elevates us. Now we know that what's in the way is not just to slip us up, but that's the springboard for growth. That's the impetus for growth. And our animal self is this, it includes our natural, our inclinations, our moral inclinations to truth. Now, here's another thing about our animal self. So it might have these 4 levels that are like these definitions that seem so hard, and it's really the place that seems like such pitfalls. But it also includes our natural and moral inclination towards compassion and kindness for others. You see, because our animal self is not good or bad. It's possibilities. Our animal self, our animal consciousness is possibilities. It's our inherent nature. And the Jews are known as Rahmanim Baishanim Gaimei Chasadim. Jews are known as compassionate people, kind people, giving people. So sometimes, we might even say, oh, I had such a nice meal in front of me, but I can't really enjoy it because other people don't have food and they're not enjoying. So our sense of caring can also come from a place that's not connected to Hashem. And so also we have a lot of positive traits that are in our expression of ourselves, and we will learn through the Tanya how we're going to use all these things, how to harness them for real connection and real choice and real goodness. Okay. I'm going to thank you so much for joining us today.